Everyone, welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's March 15th, 2023. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse is a DevOps accelerator. We help companies conquer AWS using our proven blueprints for Terraform and offer a guaranteed outcome or your money back. So if you're starting from scratch or just not happy with what you have today, you need to go to cloudposse.com/quiz and book a session with me. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz. For those of you new to the call, our format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered today. So if you're curious about Cloud Posse or any of our open source tools and modules, this is a great place to ask. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/officehours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a recording of our session today to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and want to support what we do over here, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out a great deal. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, youtube.com/cloudposse. So with that said, I got a bunch of interesting announcements. Some of these were shared with me. We'll go through these. One is AWS Labs has released their own Mountpoint for S3. This allows you to access S3 as like a POSIX style file system. Over the years, we've used other tools like Goofy's, has been very effective, high performance POSIX-ish file system. In order to make it performant, they removed some kinds of things that you get in POSIX, like last modified timestamps and things like that. So I'm curious how performant this is. Sounds like they did optimize it for read-heavy workloads. Has anyone already kicked the tires on it? So the use case for something like this is largely like you have some legacy applications, third-party applications, which you cannot change the code for, and you want some highly durable, reliable file system, less expensive than EFS, and you don't need the performance guarantees of something like EFS because you got to pay to play when you use that. Examples where we've used it in the past would be like SFTP, implementing our own SFTP service. This is before Amazon SFTP was available. Also used it for storing configuration files that contain secrets in a more secure way where those could be centralized on an S3 storage and encrypted at rest. All right. Next tool that was brought to my attention is a tool by the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. They do a lot of interesting Terraform-y things and DevOps adjacent, so interesting organization to follow. So Fogg is a tool. Honestly, the fastest way to describe it is it looks like cookie cutter, written in Golang, does similar things for templating out your infrastructure. I just kind of find it kind of ironic that, we have a tool that generates infrastructure as code. Is this kind of meta, and the fact is obviously the association with Facebook, very meta. Strange to be generating code that is for infrastructure as code. I'm sure there's some good reasons to do it, but I always am skeptical or hesitant to recommend code generation because no one likes to review pull requests that were generated from code. They're unreviewable, especially if those changes are significant. So, has anyone checked out Fogg? All right. Next one, pretty insane vulnerability to be coming out in the year 2023. I had to look it up. If anyone remembers the ping of death, that was in 1997. I feel so old now, but in Windows, there's apparently a high severity RCE, remote code execution vulnerability via ICMP. Yeah. Is the patch available, Jeremy?
Oh yeah, so that's basically was released on the 14th on Tuesday for Patch Tuesday, if I recall
Oh,
correctly. So this is just Microsoft's best way of saying, hey, really important that you get our latest patch. And so far, nobody probably knows how to do it, but if they do, it's probably going to be too late if you wait. So
yeah.
it's pretty
Well,
urgent.
the good news is out of the box, the Windows firewall ships with disabling ICMP and ICMP responses. So you would have had to explicitly turn it on and opt into it in order to be vulnerable. So hopefully it's really not that widespread.
Yeah.
And to what version of Windows? Like, how far back does this go?
They didn't specify. They showed that it goes as late as the Windows Server 2022
Mhm.
for what it affects, but who knows?
Yeah.
So I saw Windows 2008, Windows 10.
Yeah.
Those look like the oldest.
Yeah. Yeah. So that means that there's going to be a lot of systems out there that don't ship with those same defaults, probably.
Yeah. No. Even all those, like going back that far, had those same defaults because that's when I left the Windows ecosystem, and it was already doing it back then. So,
Okay, gotcha.
although Andy did just point out in in chat that a lot of people just turn off the Windows firewall because it's annoying. So I guess if you did that, you're vulnerable too. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Good time to invest in your what do you call them? The ransomware companies right now, because they're gonna have a field day with this.
Yeah.
All right. This was interesting. I haven't independently verified this, so I don't want to be spreading blood.
It's 100% true. I got the email yesterday about one
Really?
of the organizations that I host on there, and it said you can get everything you had previously. Just sign up for one of our paid plans. Here's the link. Click here. So yeah.
Right.
And in case you aren't aware, Alex is basically a part of OpenFaaS, right? Functions as a service on Kubernetes. So
they were affected.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would trust that blog maybe more than some, but at the same time, you're right to question if it's FUD.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, a few companies can do things like GitHub, right? Offer unlimited source control for free, like that. I can understand why they're doing it, but it's yeah, not good PR.
Yeah, my read on it, and the reason why I linked it was I wanted to mention that, you know, I grew up where universities would host content for folks who did not have the means for hosting it or could not afford to do it. And there was like a sort of an honored kind of tradition kind of a thing where you just had your FTP and your HTTP. It might be throttled, but it was available. And it's funny how we've gotten to a point where folks are, you know, centralizing some of their applications. I know that there are ways, for instance, to tell Docker to use other registries, but it's, you know, out of the box, not pointed at that. And they don't really have a CDN system, but it would probably solve this kind of a thing, right? If they just let everybody kind of mirror and share the cost.
It's fun to hear those things because I mean, like these days, you don't even think about FTP anymore. But that's how I grew up, spending my days in high school, right? Indexing FTP servers. So back then, there were mirrors of all these everywhere. But yeah, Docker registries, you don't see them mirroring. I just the scale of data is just so astronomically greater, I guess, than what we dealt with back in the day with FTP and mirroring operating systems. But yeah.
And Michael, I would add to what you said about Rancher. I use Colima, which is a really nice way to run Docker on Mac over QEMU. But there's a lot of other solutions out there for variants of Docker in the protocol. And I just hope that folks would either find a really nice HTTP analog for the registry, or just find, a way to do what I think everybody does really well, which is when you're sharing open source, you find a great way to share that endeavor with other folks, and you lose a little bit of control, but I think that that's kind of a good thing.
Someone mentioned using GitHub's package hosting. But is that actually free for even open source or highly limited? I feel like it's you can't. I don't know. In the early days, we tried using that, and it wouldn't work for us at Cloud Posse with like geodesic. I'm just curious how GitHub's package registry works for Docker these days. Anyone
There are
know?
some limits on it. I don't have them in front of me right off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure if you're an open source project and you're hosting images on GitHub packages, it's pretty much free. You might have some limits on the
Yeah, it's
download.
only 500 megs though. Package size
Oh.
can't exceed 500 megs if it's for free.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's probably what we ran into with geodesic, because it's over a gig. So.
Or at least that's how it reads. I don't know if that's like, it says like the free one says 500 megs of package storage free for public repositories. So I don't know. Well, I haven't tested it, but that is what it seems to read, in my opinion. So
Yeah. All right. And for what it's worth, we have published geodesic, which is one of the few Docker images that a lot of our customers depend on, and that is available on S3's public Amazon's public ECR registry. All right, next announcement. I was really excited to see this one here. In hindsight, it's like, wait, duh, why wasn't this introduced a decade ago or years and years ago? But now those IMDS credentials that you can get automatically on EC2 instances can be restricted to the instance of origin where they came from. So even if somebody manages to exfiltrate those, which is horrible, those would be useless outside of that instance. So not only would you have to exfiltrate them, you'd have to also have physical or some ability to execute things on the instance to get any benefit from them. So I think this eliminates a whole class of attack vectors with IMDS.
yeah, now if they'll just let you determine which OS users are allowed to call the endpoint, that would be great.
Yeah, I like
because as a non-privileged user, being able to call the endpoint and then get a token and do whatever you want with it is really like, I mean, there are ways you can do it with like IP tables. You can basically like do a bunch of stuff, but it takes work to lock it down, and it's a pain in the ass. Where if they had a sane default that was like, if you're not root, you can't call the endpoint, that would make a lot more sense. Or you could only call certain parts of the endpoints or whatever.
I don't see how that would, I mean, that would require OS level enforcement. So something installed at the OS level versus this here, I can see is just something that they implement at the network layer to require those creds are only eligible or valid from certain IP addresses, which they have from the TCP.
They're not really like, I mean, this is still within a single instance of EC2, right?
Yeah,
that it's happening. So yeah,
but they can be enforcing who's using those credentials at a network layer, so it doesn't require any installation of packages or modifications of the host OS or kernel or anything else like that for this to work. Versus anything that would be based on the user would have to be at the OS level.
Yeah, I still think this is at the OS level, but we can argue it later, because I think the way that they're getting that endpoint in is they're actually injecting in a local interface that you can call. Like it's on, that's a non-routable like loopback address that you're calling, like to get the all the metadata service is on there. So they're doing something to trick you there. So yeah, but anyway, we could agree not to belabor the point, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I could. Yeah, like you said, that might be possible.
Can we take a step back for a sec? Is this what is this exactly? Is this like a addition to the trust relationship on IAM roles that are usually associated with instance profile?
Yes, the IAM roles associated with instance profile. So I guess this is what you can add now as a condition.
Right. So basically, someone can't grab those credentials off an EC2 instance and then use them from somewhere not on that EC2 instance. Like if the credential got leaked somehow. So you basically can say that it has to be coming from that actual EC2 instance that issued it.
It looks like it's not on by default though, right? So you have to go and edit each of your instance profiles, and if you want to take advantage of that.
You have to add it to the policy of the instance profile as it's generated, correct?
I mean, it's better than nothing, but could be a fair bit of work.
Yeah. Linda, if you're on the call, let's add a task. This would be a good thing to add, like to our Bastion instance module, which
it'd be a good thing to add to our EC2 module, and then everything would be able to use it.
exactly. Add it to our EC2 instance, exactly, and then everything else benefits from it. All right. Last announcement that I got was just something I caught my eye in the last minute. Someone posted on the Office Hours channel. Is a CLI tool from AWS Labs to make it easier to extract the or not extract, but to construct a tarball from objects in S3. I haven't looked further into it. Can't say I've had the use case, but I can see here in this example, maybe if there's some multi-part files or something uploaded that'd be beneficial.
It's like if you wanted to download an entire directory from S3 as a tarball.
Yeah.
Like that seems like it could be useful in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Not to mention you'll save on your transfer costs.
But this is still, this must, well, yeah, how is this implemented? Because is Amazon returning a tarball?
No,
it's
also incurring costs. It's doing copy and put operations. At the bottom there is some calculations, pricing calculations. Yeah, there.
All right. Anyone else come across some interesting announcements this week? All right. Well, then let's jump into talking points. So this is actually really apropos this question. Unfortunately, Jeremy on our side, Jeremy Grodberg, doesn't seem like he's on that I see. It was something we were working through internally as we are porting geodesic finally to ARM 64 and related. But Darren Pham, you were working on this issue yourself. Building multi-architecture images under GitHub Actions and enabling caching. You haven't been able to find a workaround for that yet?
I have not. So the Docker team, the GHA caching does not work with mount caches because it sends the cache to the buildx volume. And obviously that volume is ephemeral with the runner. There are some hacks that people have done that essentially uses, I think, inline cache, and then exports that volume into a tar file. You can see where that is very hacky, where, you know, over time that will grow, and then the loading, the untarring, and the loading, and then the retarring sometimes actually takes longer than if you had just built it with no cache in the first place. So that's one hack that I've seen and tried. You could also, you know, create like a cache stage as well. I don't think this is ideal, because that kind of defeats the whole purpose of a mount cache, as opposed to, you know, using Docker stages. I'm currently working on using S3, so we'll see how that goes. That also, you know, if you don't have S3, how are you going to share credentials amongst developers? Making sure that S3 credentials are in your pipeline, making sure that you still occasionally, I guess, clean up your caches in S3, unless, you know, you don't really care. I mean, S3 is pretty cheap, so the cost could be negligible depending on your current AWS bill, but it is there. So if anyone has, yeah, any recommendations on this, I'd like to know.
Thanks for giving all that context in the background.
One thing I'll just kind of add as a note, if maybe Eric or anyone else, when caching apt packages, they have to be, sharing has to be locked, because apt will create a lock file. And although you could technically have ARM and AMD packages available in your cache apt directory, if you're trying to build concurrent, build the architecture images concurrently, that will fail, because they're going to try and use create a lock at the same time. So sharing equal locked works. A workaround I found for that was you can set an ID where you interpolate the target arc as a Docker file arg, and that will allow you to create different IDs that don't have any collision to continue concurrent builds as opposed to serial. So little trick there.
Are you doing any of this work in open source or in public?
Yes and no. I have a couple of open source PRs that are looking into this, but are, you know, currently blocked with GHA. I could kind of strip out the mount caching to kind of show a good example of concurrent multi-architecture image builds.
I was just curious. I mean, don't want you to go through.
No worries.
If you had it, then I'd suggest you share it. That could be interesting for others.
I'm also leaning heavily into Docker bake files, Docker bake.htcls and other things. If you haven't used Docker bake files yet, highly recommend start looking into using them in your CICD pipelines. It's an amazing tool to help you extrapolate the necessary Docker file arguments, as well as the buildx kind of runtime arguments and options as well.
Yeah, I keep hearing that. It's really nice. I have only heard positive things.
So maybe I missed something here, but is it not possible to use the GitHub cache to save the actual like cache, you know, directories, and have it like basically swap in one for each architecture that you're building and build them on separate workflows? And you could do that in parallel, and then when you can actually say like mount type equals cache or whatever, and then point to the restored version that is your x86 or your ARM or your whatever other platform you're building for. Does that not work? I haven't actually tried it, but I'm just reasoning about it in my head.
I probably should have. I read through a bunch of GitHub PRs and issues for the BuildX repository, and I think I recall some folks mentioning specifically that, and it's just not a feature that is compatible, I think, with GitHub Actions. I could totally be wrong and just misreading things at 3 a.m. So I'll see if I can link those PRs in chat in just a moment.
The
Yeah,
feedback
cool.
I've heard from our customers, that GitHub Actions, like using GitHub caching when you're on AWS with your self-hosted runners, isn't that performant. You get much better performance using native
On
or not
public
native,
runners. Yeah.
Yeah, some folks have also just gone the self-hosted route and attached like an NFS, which once again, that in my mind is a hack. There is a very long PR that specifically talks about this. And I just wanted to see if maybe there were less hacky ways, or if maybe folks were able to find a more elegant solution than some of the things that I found. Let me find that PR now. Yeah.
If you're going to go that hacky route and share a volume with all of your runners, at least make it EFS, so it makes it much easier to use.
Yeah, S3 seems to be working ish. I haven't fully tested it out, but we'll see if that works. That is very much in beta as a cache type, but if it solves all of our problems, then it's probably best. I presume that GitHub Actions has 10 gigabytes of cache for free at the moment. I can foresee that they will eventually lower it and add some cost pricing around.
Building Docker images, 10 gigs is not a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
I linked the issue. I think it's the one you're talking about in the chat. It's been open since 2020, and I think you've kind of alluded to it. Matt asked, like, can you just like swap in the caches? And apparently BuildX doesn't allow you to. I've never actually worked too much with mount caches before, but they can't really let you change the location of it, I guess. And it's just been ongoing, like this issue. And at the very end, posted a month ago, somebody's like, yeah, I'm using some S3 tools and blah, blah, blah. And it kind of works, which is also what you said.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of hacks and
2 years of history in the last 2 minutes on this call, or 3 years, almost 3 years of history, I guess, at this point.
We're just that efficient at content,
Which is kind of a funny throwback to the S3 tooling that we were looking at that just came out. Maybe somehow it's going to go hand in hand with this workaround.
Here's a couple of other PRs, and the second to latest comment is from Crazy Max. He's a core developer of Docker.
That's actually what I was suggesting right there.
Yeah, that's what I thought. He's like, no, it won't. Unfortunately, there is a much bigger PR that actually demonstrates some hacks that people have proposed, and some people kind of attach their repository and say, hey, try this out.
All right. Any other announcements or questions we can answer for the group today?
I just wanted to kind of chime in on something that I noticed. So it's actually something, it's funny because it's related to this a little bit, not related to caching at all, but it's actually, I saw a comment, I'm going to try and find it really quickly, Eric, made by Crazy Max. It's based on, so last month, I'm just multitasking, so sorry if I'm speaking slowly. Last month, the BuildX 0.10 came out, and by default, they started doing OCI compliant images by default. There's like a provenance flag. Let me link this. I found the comment here. I posted it in the chat, Eric. So by default, it has provenance set to true. So it's going to build OCI compliant manifest lists, so multi-arc images by default. And so this, and I've seen this happen like on Argo workflows, like the public project, like it broke their builds because they were doing some funny stuff with manifests, and now it started producing manifest lists. So they had to fix it. But basically, like this change in BuildX is kind of forcing a lot of projects to just support out of the box multi-arc images. And obviously there's some stuff you have to do. If you're in your Docker file, hard coding, like a good example for you guys is you're doing wget on a Terraform binary. And instead of target arc, like the automatically populated environment variable, arg in the Docker file DSL that BuildX populates, like you're just doing like AMD 64. So you're gonna have to do some stuff to actually like support ARM64, stuff like that. But you can actually see, and I've seen this with like Bitnami images, like there's a jump between last month, before February, and images built like after February, that now suddenly they support ARM64 images. And so this is like a good opportunity. Like our team took it to, we're on Carpenter for Kubernetes, and we just started using ARM64, like EC2 instances more, which can give you like 25% cost savings. And if you're talking about like a lot of money in AWS, like we're talking about like six-figure AWS bills every month, like it's something worth trying. And now that BuildX made this change, it's kind of mainstreaming these OCI compliant images, and it's a good opportunity to start moving to ARM-based Kubernetes workloads.
Only because this is something we're kind of dealing with now, though. That would mean, though, that by default this would not be working under like GitHub Actions, where you cannot build then ARM64 Debian images. You can only do that on self-hosted.
Yeah. That's and I think probably they knew what they were doing, like with so I think that they're like, if you're using like an action that is using BuildX, obviously they're pinning it or not pinning it, sorry, they're setting the provenance flags or the and whatnot. But so to avoid that, but let's say you're on self-hosted GitHub Actions runners and you're doing BuildX like yourself, and like you will see, and I've seen workflows that are very custom that they just broke because of this. But in general, OCI compliant images are now magically more popular. So it's really a good opportunity to try out some ARM-based workloads on Kubernetes and save a little bit of cash, especially if you're on Carpenter and using Spot instances.
So I just want to comment on something, Eric, that you said. I think that if you're using BuildX, you can build the ARM64 on it, because it's like BuildX is a cross compiler. That's exactly what it's meant for, is being able to cross compile, just like you can like cross compile like Go binaries, to that target different architectures. That's what BuildX is supposed to allow you to do as well. So I think we want to double check that. I'm pretty sure that you can do that from from GitHub Actions in public.
You can. So what you do is if you use the GitHub Actions, what's it called, module? Set up
their official action. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You can you can specify platform, because it's Docker and Docker, so the Docker container
and when you actually run BuildX, like Docker BuildX create, there's a flag on it that it's like -- platform, and you can actually tell it the platform you want it to build for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like it uses QEMU under the hood, so I just remember you can build any architecture. But yeah, like the change here is just this like OCI compliance thing. So like unless you're hard coding ARM like AMD 64 binaries, or like you're gonna see a lot of projects that are suddenly producing ARM64 images if they weren't already. So it's really good news for getting off of Intel-based stuff on EC2.
If you are going to do that, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, if you are going to do that, you do have to set up QEMU also, like along with BuildX in order to be able to do all that.
Yep.
You know,
I have
actually,
an extension to this question, but we can wait until this is finished.
Or just, yeah, Matt, so, well, because I'm just a little bit confused because we had just been talking about this. So in order then to do the cross-compiled images, you in public on GitHub.com public runners, you have to also run an action then that sets up QEMU first, and then
there's actually Docker. There's an official one. Docker setup QEMU action, and then you do Docker setup BuildX action, and then you actually like build your images like from after that basically.
Is there any way to test the images after they're built after that? Like today, like when we build Geodesic, I think, or when we build one of our packages, like for AMD 64, afterwards we try running it inside of a container.
Yeah, you can't do that, like targeting the different architectures, but you can for sure, if you build a multi-image architecture, you can run it on the architecture that you're on, and then you can Docker inspect it and make sure that it lists the architecture that you've targeted in the multi-architecture target as well.
Well, you can, I mean, like when you do once you have your multi-architecture image built, you can then just run Docker run and then specify the platform, right? Then
assuming you have, but Eric's asking if you're running on x86, can you actually run, the ARM version of it to make sure that that it runs? And you can't really.
Why
you
not?
can't really. I mean, well,
or?
you can, but it's doing emulation. It's not actually.
Oh, it's not. Okay. So I guess
it's not actually running it. Right.
Yeah. A good workaround for that, then maybe what you could do is after you've built your multi-architecture image, whether you want to just save it to a cache or tar or actually publish it, you can create subsequent GitHub Actions steps or jobs that will matrix in different platforms.
True.
That would be a decent workaround.
But I don't think ARM64 is supported in public runners for GitHub. That's what we're.
Oh,
at least for Linux. Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's only for Mac that they have that. The last time we looked.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah, I think that was what drove this whole discussion, like on why we needed to do that. But you can definitely build it. It's just you wouldn't be able to run it and test it.
Yeah. All right. Maybe we just forego that for now. Then that's probably the best thing, because they're supposedly by they have scheduled support for it, but end of this year, Q4, to add.
I was going to say, or you just have a self-hosted runner that only runs that job step, and you target that only for the verification, which will be very little time, and that you actually need it for. And then all the rest of it can be on public runners if you want it.
Have you guys heard of ACT?
Yeah.
Look up ACT. If you guys have heard of it, then never mind.
I've got. I used to. I hated it, then I loved it. Now I'm back to hating it.
Really?
Yeah, there are.
Recently, you were loving it, like in the last 2 months.
I was.
It sounds.
It's not all it's cracked up to be. There are like. There are things like that they do inside of it that make it really difficult to test like setup packages, because they actually mount like temporary directories cross volumes in there, where they don't do that in the regular GitHub runner. So you get errors locally when you don't get them when you actually run them in a GitHub runner. And there's a bunch of other things that just it's too good to be true for a lot of like complex use cases.
The relationship that you described with this project sounds exactly how I feel with local stack. like on surface, it's so great. And then you start using it and it's actually awesome because it's super fast. And then for anybody who's in a local stack is like a local AWS API. And then you run into some bugs and you're like, okay, I guess I'll report it and like look into the code. And then you sign up and pay for their pro thing and whatever. And you get even more features. And then those features don't work, but you can't even like debug anything because it's in a proprietary code base. And then, yeah, but
I have been banging my head against because of local stack in the last 2 weeks. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's I think we've just entered another generation or another era. You can't expect local development anymore for anything.
Yeah, what was the thing that Matt said that he loved, hated, and then loved again for the GitHub Actions?
Act, netcos, NETKOS / act.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, it's that's the repo for it. For simple use cases, it works really well. When you get into when you're building complex actions, especially like reusable actions that use like the JavaScript toolkit that GitHub has released for doing like caching and software installation and all of that kind of thing, it kind of falls over on its side. And then when you're building a big pipeline that relies on something in one of those steps, then you kind of you kind of are screwed because like the second step is install this thing and it doesn't work, and then you can't test anything else from that point. So you have to like do a bunch of things. It's I don't know. It's okay.
Yeah. I can imagine it was, well, yeah, I was going to say, I could imagine it was more effective before GitHub Actions got so advanced, but then it had more bugs on just the basic things. I guess they fixed the basic things, but now GitHub Actions has leapfrogged ahead in terms of functionality with composite actions and shared workflows and all the other stuff that I could imagine is really hard to keep up with that.
Yeah, and of course it's against GitHub's best interest for them to publish a tool that does this, because then you don't pay them for minutes in their runners to do everything you want to do.
I mean, you already don't do that, right? If
you're an open source project, yes.
Well, no,
but
any self-hosted runners, right? Even in private repos.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
There is also, GitHub did release the ability, I remember we talked it on office hours now months ago, but like the ability to have runners locally on your laptop. And I thought it was introduced as a improvement for development and iteration, but have you tried that or looked into it at all, Matt?
A little bit. It was really complex to get up and running. Like, you have to do the two things where you do that and also figure out an easy way to trigger all of your actions on your local runner in order to be able to do that. That's kind of the pain. So getting a runner working on your local workstation is pretty easy. It's basically, though, like debugging stuff and triggering it doesn't get any easier. You still have to like make commits to your repo and push them and do all sorts of silly stuff like that.
Slower, depending on how powerful your laptop is. It might be easier to just spin up a EKS cluster and run actions runner controller and beef it up. And because the beauty of Act, allegedly, I've never used it, is you can just like edit a line, bam, run the workflow, edit another line, bam. Here you're waiting for the control loop and for the runner to accept the job, and you have to push and do all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can, on the command line, you can specify the action and any of the context variables you want to override. You can do that right in the command line as well, which is to trigger your action, which actually makes it really easy. But like I said, you run into limitations pretty quickly when you're doing like complex stuff.
Weird. Like all I see is everything on just regular self-hosted runners. I forget there was a GitHub blog announcement on it.
Yeah, there were two things that they announced. One was just that they had, I think they released like a Mac OS version so that you could run the runner locally. But then the second one was that they had a proxy for GitHub CLI so that you could actually capture any events that were raised and then do something with those locally. I don't know if you're thinking of that, but
Yeah, that reminds me. Does anyone be able to create OCI v2 manifests in AWS ECR? My testing with multi-arc images from Docker BuildX sends v1 manifests with v1 images that aren't Docker tagged.
Is that are you talking about there? And like when you hover over you go into the ECR registry and you see the artifact, you hover over and you see like they have like
Yeah, the spec,
you know what I'm talking about? It's like
the spec
it's like
version used is, yeah.
it looks like an API, like in Kubernetes, like they have an API. Docker has not Docker's, but OCI, like it has their own like yeah, I don't know. I was looking at that literally today.
Yeah.
Forget if it was v1 or v2.
Yeah, the workaround I have right now, no relation to this repository, is you essentially have to create your individual architecture images and then manually create a manifest that links the two. So you do get two Docker images that are properly tagged, and then a manifest that links the two with the appropriate, platform. So from the, user standpoint, they still have that individual image or manifest to use.
I was just looking at it. Hold on. Look in this is what I'm seeing in ECR in the chat.
Yeah, that's
Are
exactly.
you saying that's v1?
So whether it's v1 or v2 manifest, what's more important to me is the image. If you look, what ends up happening for me is I get, an ARM and an AMD image, and it's just a media type of image, and it is untagged. So I was wondering if there's a way that folks have been able to tag those specific images appropriately. I think I can, let's see if I can like pull something up really quick as a good example.
Like you saw the screenshot I put in the chat. So you're saying the top is it's a v2 manifest, but the actual media type is the v1, and you're saying it's untagged.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to, because I remember looking at the docs today they say like in the ECR docs you have to do manifest push, but that's not related to BuildX either. So I guess what you're doing, the workaround, is like the supported way of doing it.
Correct way. I was hoping that BuildX just had that native capability, but I'm not sure if this is a limitation on ECR, which I don't think so, because ECR already has OCI v2 capability.
I think it's something if you're doing the BuildX push, it's a limitation in that.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
I think that's what it is. Or maybe there's some magical flag that you need to set to get it to work properly with ECR.
Can I share my screen real quick, or is that not allowed?
That's fine. I'll stop sharing for a second.
This is not going to be probably relevant to a lot of people, so I'll make it brief. So here's an example where, if I'm pushing, like when I push this image, it's a v2. And what ends up happening is you get untagged images that don't look like they like realistically every image should be tagged, first of all. But second of all, these are the AMD and the ARM64 images, I believe. And they just get pushed alongside. But this is the image this is the tag that people would actually use. Whereas when I use that manifest tool, you individually have to push these images. and then in your manifest push, it would just reference these two. And I was hoping that there's a way to natively do that, but seems to not be the case. So,
but I think I'm getting like, unless something is wrong in my screenshot, like you're saying, that's not the right OCI version. Like I just do Docker buildx with the push flag, and it only has like in ECR, it only shows up as the actually, does it show up as a, hold on, it says artifact type image, and this is the multi-arc image, so it is like the manifest list with the, I don't know, you're probably, the way you're talking about it, you sound like you're more accurate with your terms, but you only get one image uploaded to ECR, but it is
so
the
maybe I'm
list
actually incorrectly pushing extraneous images that aren't actually being used, but maybe I'll just delete the extra two that are untagged and see if that works for me. If you have an example and you can link it, I would appreciate whatever commands or Docker files that you have, so I can reproduce.
Yeah, hold on.
Thanks.
Also,
sorry, lots of Docker stuff today.
Yeah, let's pause on that. But also, I mean, this is a great opportunity just to, for others. If you find any of these things interesting, you want to follow up, like Jonathan, yourself, I'm sure are on the sweetops Slack. So it's a great way to follow up on these things and close the loop.
Yep, thanks.
All right.
I've been enjoying these open discussions like this, like when you don't have talking points. This has been nice.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I like. I really love to see when the community can come together and help each other out.
I got a lot of talking points. So I got a lot of pain going on here. So don't mind if I do.
Go. Very cool. Well, not very cool about the pain, but happy that you have some talking points.
It's our pain now, right? It's
misery loves company.
Wait, so can I just ask one quick question to Darren? When you're actually doing that build or push, you are actually using like the fully qualified like tag name, right? Like so when you're doing like, Docker buildx builds, you're doing like -- tag and then the full like ECR address / image name : like whatever, and then you're doing push after that, and it still doesn't push it.
So actually, I'm with the bake. So with bake, you don't do a build and a push. You set the output. It's an output flag, because push is essentially star dot output is equal to registry, right? So I'm just setting output type as registry.
Got it.
Yeah.
I made a gist, gist or gist.
I would say gist because it's GitHub.
Yeah, so I'm just it's kind of like, I don't know, like I'm not saying it's the right way. I've just been working on it today, trying to figure it out. For some reason, like when I was doing like a push, like the native push on buildx, I was getting like ECR wasn't authorizing it. I really don't know. And then for other reasons as well, like I just had it like originally when I wasn't using buildx, I wanted to have the push in a separate step based on if it's to the main branch. And so I just kind of kept it this way. And also I think with the context or something, like I basically had to do the export, like this is the native export with buildx. You see the O, like the line 11.
Yeah. And
then you can import it on line 20. And this isn't really best practice because when you import an image, it actually strips away entry point and CMD. So you're gonna have to like set it yourself, which is why, this is not like production ready kind of stuff. This is just something I was messing around with. But it's producing for whatever reason, I guess because I do O-type OCI, it's actually producing the proper artifact in ECR. Is what it looks like. Like if you disregard like the import stuff and the way I'm actually exporting it, other than that, I think maybe the key is like the type has to be OCI and not Docker, because I think Docker is another option. Maybe that's something you could try. Just take a look. But
Yeah, there
seems
is actually an additional flag that you can set when you do type of Docker, and you tell it to do to have the OCI metadata. Let me find that for you. I also tried that with I don't think it worked. See if I can find it for you. All right, here you go. Yeah, I think you're on the right track where ideally you do want to, I do want to build and push in the same step. But if it's the fact that I have to build it to a tar file that's OCI compliant, and then push it in a separate step to the registry, that's just what I'll have to do.
Well,
where are these flags? Please continue without me. I'll
that's a perfect stopping point, I guess.
Yeah.
We are basically at the end of the hour here. So thank you everyone for joining us for office hours
Sounds
today.
good. I'll post it in Slack.
I learned something, so I always like that. Thank you guys for talking shop and working through those problems. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, go to youtube.com/cloudposse to subscribe. Today's office hours session will be posted there in a couple hours. Also, great opportunity. For example, if you're dealing with GitHub Action issues, building multi-architecture images, this might be a nice video you can share with your team too. I'll probably be doing that internally. So with that said, we have our Slack community. It's at slack.cloudposse.com. Again, slack.cloudposse.com. Great place to connect with other like-minded individuals. If you want to connect with me, go to linkedin.com/in/Osterman. I like to accept invitations from everyone here in the community. And to see if Cloud Posse is a fit for your business and what you're trying to do, go to cloudposse.com/quiz. Answer a few simple questions and you'll book a session directly with me, and we'll work through your situation and see if we can help you out. See you all next week, same time, same place, every Wednesday at 11:30 Pacific. And yeah, have a great rest of your week. Take care.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Matt. Jonathan.